And the winner of Gamer of the Year is Onion Creature.
Wow, here I am at the Game Awards, winning Gamer of the Year 2023. It's always been my dream. Thank you to everyone who got me here on this stage. I have been gaming all year, I'll admit it. Yeah, I've been putting in the hours, you could say. Okay, before I continue, I have something written down that I think you're all going to want to hear. Where the hell is Octopath Traveler 2?
Hello friendos, I just wanted to take some time to discuss Octopath Traveler 2, which is actually one of my favorite games that released this year. It's honestly kind of a masterpiece, and I'm a bit saddened because it does not seem to be getting the official recognition that I believe it deserves, and I think other fans of the game also believe it deserves. Specifically, it's Game Awards season, and the game received 0 nominations and didn't even make it through the first round of the Player's Choice category, which is the fan vote category. It was eliminated in the first round of voting, which was very sad.
Another thing I wanted to make clear is that while I'm mentioning the Game Awards quite a bit in this video, it's just one example of major gaming media ignoring this title, which I think is a shame. But of course, there's lots of other gaming publications and news media that I also feel has neglected to properly recognize the achievement that this game made.
Because of that, I want to bring further attention to it because I think it's actually really worth playing and worthy of recognizing as one of the greatest achievements this year in video gaming. I think one of the factors that might have led to its lack of recognition is the fact that it was published by Square Enix and not Nintendo. It was a multi-platform release as opposed to the original, which was only released on Switch originally and then ported to other systems and PC later on. In Octopath 2's case, it launched on Switch alongside other systems. The other HD 2D games like Live Alive, Octopath 1, and Triangle Strategy were published by Nintendo, and it seems like that might have been a mistake because I definitely feel like the marketing up to release was a bit lackluster, and that could have been because it didn't have a Nintendo push behind it. Another factor to consider is market saturation. When the first Octopath Traveler released in 2018, there weren't that many other games that looked like it. Now, several years later, we have multiple other games in the HD 2D style, and other imitators are starting to pop up as well, and we have some announced that have not released, like the Dragon Quest III remake. So the market for the HD 2D genre is a lot more crowded than it was back when Octopath 1 released, which could be another contributing factor. Either way, though, the end result was that Octopath Traveler 2, in my opinion, did not reach its full potential in terms of being recognized as an excellent game. In my opinion, it improves on the original Octopath in basically every category and is really just a great game. And I definitely would recommend it to anyone and everyone who likes RPG type things or games with unique and interesting stories. It has beautiful music. The music is just as great as the original, if not better. The visuals have been improved as well and feature more dynamic camera movements and more elaborate visual effects. And I think that the story in Octopath 1, while serviceable, was definitely one of the most lacking elements. It took me about 70 hours to beat Octopath 1, and Octopath 2 took me 80 hours to beat, but I enjoyed the story far more. All 8 individual stories I thought were expertly told in large part, and I was far more engaged by the story and thought that it went in far more interesting directions than the original did. There's also been quite a lot of gameplay improvements. I liked a lot of the characters in Octopath 1, but some of them were stronger than others. In Octopath 2, I think that they're all actually pretty great and have compelling stories with quite a lot of variety in terms of themes and tone. My favorite definitely is Particio. He's the traveler I chose to start with, and I thought that his opening chapter was just really well done, and I find his mannerisms and characteristics to be very enjoyable. He's essentially a benevolent merchant who just wants to make the world a better place, which was a fun angle to take that class, and I thought that they contrasted him with the main villain of his story, not without spoiling it, is more of a cynical, greedy capitalist type character as opposed to Particio. There's stuff about patents and contracts, and it's pretty fun. There's lots of other great stories like Oswald, which starts with this really great prison break sequence There's Hikari, who has this very dramatic story of reclaiming his throne, which was stolen. It's fairly Shakespearean. That was pretty great. There's Throne, the thief, who has a very dark story, which is full of depravity and menacing evil villains. Agnia's story is the lightest, I would say, but still very engaging and enjoyable. In it, she seeks to become a great dancer. Just a light story, but still very fun. Cassidy is an apothecary who has lost her memory and is seeking to gain it back. Ochette is traveling in order to stop the apocalypse from happening on her home island. And then there's Temenos the cleric, whose whole story is about solving a mystery, which goes in some interesting places. What's great about all these stories and characters is that they intersect more than they did in the original. I think there is still more room for character interaction, but in the original game there really wasn't any interaction between the different characters, between the chapters, which was disappointing and kind of weird. But in Octopath 2 you get little sections where they talk to each other between story sections and sort of discuss what's happening, and you get the feel of camaraderie, and there's also dialogue in battles where they talk to each other, and it just makes the game feel a whole lot more cohesive than the original was. I won't spoil the final chapter of the game, but it does bring these characters' stories together in interesting ways and felt like a fitting finale. The original game also had a final boss section, but I never did it because it was hidden behind a sort of obtuse side quest. I found the final boss of Octopath 2 to be very challenging, but also possible, and I was in the end able to defeat it after a couple of attempts, even though I'm not the greatest at RPGs. So I would say the story of Octopath 2 is a resounding success. Not every single chapter is exceptional, but they're all consistently good, and there are definitely some standout moments in there that I really, really liked. I also really enjoyed some of the world building that you see in Octopath 2. I think it's supposed to take place in the same universe as Octopath 1, just in the future. There's been a lot more technological advancements. Octopath 2 takes place in a sort of industrial revolution type setting for much of it. There's still more fantasy type areas and areas with less technology, but there's definitely sort of light steampunk theming throughout, which I actually thought was a fun visual change of pace from the original, which was more focused on just the high fantasy setting without much technology. And that also plays into the story of some characters. Even though it has these new elements in the world, it does still feel like the same universe, just in a future period which has access to more advanced technology. In terms of gameplay improvements, I think there's quite a lot from the original. I really loved the way the turn-based battles functioned in Octopath 1, and I think that they're even better here. There's quite a lot of variety added to the experience, and I think the gameplay overall is just smoother in general. One feature I made use of quite a bit was the ability to speed up battles. This made grinding a lot easier and less painful. There's also the new system of latent abilities, which is a gauge that's filled up and allows the character to make use of their specified latent ability, some of which are extremely useful. There's also the new system of guilds, which allow you to give characters secondary jobs, which was something that was also kind of in Octopath 1, but it's a lot more elaborate here. Another big feature of the game, both in terms of story and gameplay functionality, is that the game can be switched from night to day at any point. At night, enemies are tougher and your characters can take different actions in towns, and this was pretty fun, and you also get a different music track depending on whether it is night or day. This adds a lot to the sheer volume of music. There's quite a lot, and it was really fun to listen to the different variants of each environment. There's just a lot of kind of crazy things you can do with the characters, especially later in the game, which I really enjoyed during battle. A lot of the bosses are very, very difficult, and it was fun to figure out what strategy to employ to best defeat them. Octopath 2 does actually still, unfortunately, have the issue that the original had, where level scaling is a bit wonky. It's kind of easy to become over-leveled for certain chapters or under-leveled for other chapters, and it's something which you kind of have to manually manage. At a certain point, you just will become over-leveled for certain chapters, and that's just the way it is, and does kind of harm the experience slightly in that certain chapters are easier than they perhaps should be, but I think overall the difficulty balance is okay. It's not terrible. I felt like in general I was being challenged throughout while I was still becoming stronger and learning new skills and abilities. So it's not the biggest deal. I think the gameplay in general does still function very well, but there are definitely some balance issues. And hopefully if there does end up being an Octopath 3, then those issues could be addressed. Although I'm not entirely sure an Octopath 3 is going to happen because 2, I guess, didn't sell that well, which is a bit of a shame. I'll also just say the sprite work and visuals are really, really great. It has a few frame drops in visual effects intensive sequences, but that didn't bother me that much for the most part. The music really is just a total highlight. I love so many of the tracks. So many of the character themes and battle themes are just really, really amazing. One other slight thing to note about this game is that it is incredibly long. I spent 80 hours on this game, and I kind of feel like I only scratched the surface. I mean, I did play all the chapters, but I did basically no side quests. There's tons of different jobs and other stuff that I just didn't unlock. But despite that, I totally do feel like I got a full experience, so I don't think you have to go do all those extras in order to feel like you've got your money's worth. And that's another criticism I have, is that I wish that the side quests and side content was a bit more accessible. I find that the instructions and way you go about doing side quests is just way too obtuse for me to even bother, especially when the rewards often just don't feel worth it. I mean, I was able to get through the game doing basically no side quests intentionally. I maybe did 2 or 3, but I never really went out of my way to do anything for a side quest, with the exception of maybe 1 that I can think of off the top of my head. And that's the other issue, is that they just aren't that memorable compared to the main story, in my opinion, though granted, I didn't go through with a lot of them because it was just too much to ask for a game that was already so massive. I just really preferred to just stick with the main story and get through that. I mean, you could easily spend well over 100 hours on this game, I'd say, based on how much I played it, just going through the main content. With that said, though, I didn't really feel like the game was wasting my time that much. In general, I felt like all the story content was worthwhile, even though there is a lot of it. A vast majority of it is definitely worth seeing and experiencing, and that's in addition to the fact that I also really just enjoyed the battle system and the overall gameplay. So that's my thoughts on Octopath Traveler 2. I just really loved this game and wanted to bring a little bit more attention to it, since official outlets seem to be lacking in that. With that said, I understand there are a lot of other great releases this year that also deserve to be recognized. With that said, I think Octopath 2 should have gotten at least a little bit of recognition from the largest award show in games media. If nothing else, I think not having the soundtrack be nominated is really a shame. That music really deserves to be heard by more people. It's so amazing. Thanks for tuning in, my friendos. I just wanted to shed a little bit more light on this title that I feel is more forgotten than perhaps it should be.
Well, that's what I have to say about Octopath 2. Hey, what you guys do? Oh, you can't do this to me. I'm Gamer of the Year.
All right.